Okay, so we started the recording. I'm John Uminga once again. I am Macy Consultants Community and Stakeholder Engagement Specialist. So before we start, we'd like for you guys to chat in our chat box. Pop in the chat box where you're calling from today. If you're from the Philippines, which city you're calling from. If you're from outside the Philippines, we understand we have some participants as well from outside the Philippines. Let us know where you're calling from. So before we start, so we at the PDSP are committed to reconciliation, strengthening relationships between Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and non-Indigenous peoples for the benefit of all. As part of our commitment to reconciliation, and before we kick off the training, MISI Consultants and its partners acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we live and work, the special relationship that exists between Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and their traditional lands and waters. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and future. Thank you so much that's our acknowledgement of country. So how is everyone doing this afternoon? So first of all, we'd like to thank everybody for taking some time off in this lazy afternoon, Saturday afternoon, for a learning session that hopefully can help our communities with our many, many challenges that we're facing. So just a few Zoom reminders as well. I know we have been doing Zoom for the past couple of years or past more than a year already. I think almost 2 years. But just a reminder, the session will be recorded as you have been notified already. We will be sharing the recording as well for our future learning resource. Secondly, please turn your camera on if you can, if your data allows or if your bandwidth allows. So that would help us engage with each other a little bit more and help us to be more present in today's webinar. Also, just so we're focused and we're not disturbing the speakers, please kindly mute your audio and unless you're called to share to speak. And finally, please kindly edit your Zoom name if you can using this format. So the name of your school, if you're a student, for the young professional, if you're able to share which organization you're connected with or you're representing today, please kindly do so as well, as including your name, of course. So those are our Zoom reminders. And before we proceed any further to the program, we'd like to have a group photo for our documentation. So if you guys can open the camera for a bit, that would be great. So let's give you a few seconds to open the camera. Okay, I can see people now. So we have 38 people in the room so far. So just confirming that we have participants from Malaysia. Oh, of course, Australia, our friends from Australia. Zamboanga. So I cannot speak Filipino, guys. So let's stick with English because we have foreign participants. So welcome everybody. So we're seeing here we have participants from Bicol, Malaysia, Zamboanga. I'm calling from Caloocan City if anyone's from Metro Manila. And our friends from Macy are from Cebu. Some of them are from Cebu as well. So, okay. I think we're ready for the photo. Last 5 seconds for everyone to turn on if you can. And Tom, can we request the screen share to be removed first for the photo? Okay, thank you. Okay, we're taking the photo now. Please flash your widest smile if you can. Let's all be excited for today's program. Okay, 1, 2, one more safety shot. 1, 2. Thank you guys. Always lovely to see faces of people in webinars, but please feel free to close them if you're not too comfortable or you're doing something else. But okay, so if you can chat, um, some people already shared where they're calling from today. But for those who haven't shared yet, so please continue just popping the information in the chat box. People from Cagayan de Oro as well. That's great. So we're done with the Zoom reminders. So why are we here today? So for the next slide, I'll be sharing the agenda. I believe this has been sent as well to your email, but if you weren't able to read through, we're going to be hearing from three opening remarks from our partners. So we have from the PDSP, Portfolio Delivery Services Partner, Earthshaker, which is a Philippine-based organization, and Edify, which is our partner as well. And we will be hearing from three plenary speakers for our three very interesting sessions. Personally, I'm very excited to hear from our speakers this afternoon. Um, these are speakers from both the Philippines and also Australia. So it would be great to hear from our speakers talking about leading through communication, UN Sustainable Development Goals, particularly the nexus of SDGs 4 and 6. So most of the time we're talking lang broadly of what what SDGs are in general. But today we will be deep diving more about 4 and 6, particularly 6, but how like 4 facilitates SDG 6. And finally, for the closing session, we will be hearing about the various environment and sanitation laws that we have in the Philippines and the relevance of these laws in our advocacy to make water accessible to more people. And of course, the closing remarks and reminders as well. So that would be today. And but the big question is, why do we have to be here and why do we have to talk about all of these things? So we're here today. Next slide, please, because we want to be able to reimagine a world where people have access to safe and clean water. You know, sometimes it's really hard to imagine or to understand and to make people understand that there's an ongoing water crisis, right? Especially if we live in an archipelago like the Philippines, we're practically surrounded by water. But the truth is, the hard truth is, a lot of people do not have access to water. And I think as an advocacy, we at Macy is really concerned about it and we want to be able to do something around this particular issue. It's a global issue. It's not only a local issue. There are billions of people who don't have access to water. As you can see here, in the Philippines, 7 million people rely on unsafe and unsustainable water sources. Siguro for most of us, we can't relate, no? Kasi when we open the tap, when we open yung gripo, water flows freely. But for many communities around the Philippines and around the world, they don't have that privilege. They don't have that access. And also, I think the Statistics Office have recently updated the population numbers. So I guess we're already 109 million. So we can check. It's recently released data from the Stats Office. And additionally, 7 out of 8 people do not have access to sewage collection and system services. And 1 out of 8 people do not have access to safe water supply. So these are really big problem that we should be solving as multi-stakeholders and as different communities of people. So apparently in the Philippines, I'm not sure if it's the same in India or Malaysia, but water supply and sanitation is limited because of, for many, many reasons, but mostly because of poor governance, limited access to finance, and affordability. So these are really big numbers to make us inspire or to help us understand why it's important to have these kinds of conversations like the one we're having this afternoon. So I have been talking a lot. If you have questions to our speakers later on, as always, pop them lang sa chat box or you may send them directly to me. If you don't want to be identified, that's fine as well. Um, Without further ado, I think for our opening remarks, I would like to welcome the Managing Director of Macy Consultants and the Project Manager of the Portfolio Delivery Services Partner, Thomas Dahose. So this PDSP is a collaborative initiative between Macy Consultants, Australia Water Association, and Water.org, committed to creating a sustainable water future. To fulfill its mission, the PDSP aims to improve the capability of water service providers and professionals working enabling to provide sustainable and reliable water and sanitation services to communities. So Thomas, would you like to share a few words, please?
Hi everyone, thank you for joining into our consortium and our pilot STEM Future Leaders Training Program. My sentiments, I strongly resonate with what John has shared. On behalf of the PDSP and our partners, I'm very excited to launch this program today and have all our wonderful participants here together to kickstart what I do believe and confidently know will be an in-depth professional and technical learning experience to empower all the current and future leaders who are working in the water, sanitation, and health sectors to help shape a sustainable water future, especially in the Philippines. It really resonates with our mission that no one is left behind. Again, this event would have not been possible without our event partner, Earthshaker. You'll hear from very shortly, our sponsors, Edified and Sonder, as well as all our collaborators. So please make the most of this event, take down notes, we'll share the learning materials, and really take the time to interact with your colleagues in the Zoom chat. Thank you for being here, and I'm quite excited. Back to you, John.
Thank you, Thomas, for your message. Just a brief of trivia. Thomas is actually an Australian-born Filipino. I'm not sure if I should divulge, but I think just to make people know who are the people in the team. And just another trivia, Macy actually means Manila and Sydney. So personally, I would like to thank Thomas for thinking about the Philippines, one of your home countries, despite being already in Australia, in Sydney, Australia. So thank you for all the work that you're doing for the advocacy. As mentioned by Thomas, please kindly, you're also encouraged to tweet. So use the hashtag #MacySTEM Future Leaders or hashtag Wash Without Borders. So those are our two hashtags for today. So without further ado, I'd like to call on our event partner for day one. So Earthshaker is an organization which aims to shake the appreciation of earth sciences in the society and empower citizens to have science-based decisions. So this is very important, especially in the context of the Philippines where we don't necessarily believe science sometimes, especially when we're talking about policies. We have to appreciate and to really go back to the importance of science in policymaking. I would like to call Rory Mariel Asinero from Earthshaker, our event partner of day one for this pilot STEM Future Leaders Training Program. Alongside her role as Director of Income Generation, Rory leads and the Search Me Up Bukidnon and Tribuk project, initiatives that aim to provide fellow student access to the internet and aid environmental restoration, respectively. Rory, take it away, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I am pleased to welcome you today on this day's event, STEM Future Leaders Training Program, a deep dive into water and sanitation sector. So in behalf of the facilitators, partners, and sponsors, I would like to thank or extend gratitude to everyone for joining us here today. Your presence serves as an encouragement and hope that we can achieve our goals and visions in this time of pandemic. So it has been more than a year since COVID-19 first struck, and we have to admit that at some point it has affected millions of lives and different sectors, including health, education, economy, and even access to food and water. One of the blessings of the pandemic is that now we all understand and appreciate the importance of science, technology, and innovation in fighting off COVID 19. Most importantly, in making this world a better, healthier, and safer place. And there's no perfect day and avenue to start pursuing that goal than now or today. Through this program, it will help us strengthen productivity and enhance our understanding of the water and sanitation sector. It will take a multifaceted approach to discussing the future of the SDGs 4 and 6 and the relationship between water and law. The Earthshaker has been around different social media platforms for almost 2 years. With our growing followers of more than 500,000, we continually aim to shake the nation through information specifically related to science. We from the Earthshaker hope that this platform, bringing together experts from Australia and Philippines, will provide leaders and professionals with tools to make a difference. To the participants, ready your hearts and minds as we dive deep into learning about water and sanitation. Once again, welcome and good day, everyone.
Thank you so much, Rory, and thank you so much once again to Earthshaker for your support to the program and to the advocacy of water and water for all, and wash for all across borders. At this time, I'd like now to call Dr. Alexander Vaninsky of Edified, the key sponsor and supporter of the PDSP team, helping make this training program possible, as well as a number of WASH field workshops currently taking place in the Cebu province as we speak. So Edified focuses on consultancy, solutions, and services in the education industry. We help education providers, government entities, peak bodies, education agents, and service providers enhance their ability to build profile and reputation, acquire and retain students, and deliver on student experience and graduate outcomes. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Dr. Alec to share a few words, please.
Hello, everyone. I'm really thrilled to be here. I think this forum is a fantastic way that we can show our support to community-driven projects. So Edified, every year, we give several $1,000s to a variety of different community groups, both in Australia as well as offshore. And this Edified Energizer grant is really designed to help communities at the local level. We think global, but we act local. We think that these sort of forums that you're having today, really provide a positive impact on your community. And we really wish everyone a productive seminar and forum today. We look forward to seeing some fantastic conversations that come out of this. And we look forward to continuing our support of projects like this in Australia, as well as the Philippines moving forward. So good luck, and thank you everyone for participating today.
Thank you so much, Alec. And in behalf of Basic Consultants and the PDSP, thank you once again for supporting and believing the project and the advocacy that we're trying to co-create with our partners here in the Philippines. At this juncture, I'd like to invite our partners for a quick photo. So once again, Rory, if you're still around, Thomas of Basic Consultants and PDSP, and Alec of Edified, please kindly turn your camera on. And we'll have the spotlight on you as well for a quick photo. If you're able to do that, Thomas. So that's first spotlight. Yay, there you go. And then Rory is right there. Okay. Okay, ready, guys? In a count of 3, 1, 2, one more. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you once again to the partners and collaborators for this STEM Future Leaders program. So without you, we wouldn't be able to conduct this training for our participants this afternoon and the next week. So without further ado, we have a jam-packed schedule. So we will dive right into the next part of the program. So just a background from the training needs assessment that we have conducted. We identified leadership and communication as key areas that early professionals wanted to further develop and tap into. So when we were designing the program, we weren't just picking on the topics randomly. So we've actually launched training needs assessment, and these are the topics that we identified are important and are needed because of the feedback that we've received. So today, for our first speaker, for the session 1 leading through communication, she is Miss Hayley Winchcombe of Australia. and she's an economics, policy, and strategy consultant with Accenture Strategy. She's also chair of the board of the ASEAN-Australia Strategic Youth Partnership, a registered charity advocating for stronger ties between Australia and our Southeast Asian neighbors. She has a big interest in solvable problems, applying data analysis to identify underlying issues and recommending business strategy or policy options. So her academic research focused on the labor migration development nexus and included time as the inaugural Australian government New Colombo Plan ASEAN Fellow. She has lived and worked across Europe and Southeast Asia. She's been here in the Philippines where I met her personally 2 years ago, I think. And without further ado, I'd like to invite Hayley to kick off the session. Welcome, Hayley.
Mabuhay! I am so excited to be meeting you all today. Thomas has told me all about how you're the future leaders of water and good sanitation in the Philippines. So I'm so excited to connect with a group who are so passionate about kind of making a positive impact in your local communities and on this really important UN SDGs. Today, I'm going to be talking a little bit about leading through communications. So if we flick to the agenda, we've got 3 items that we're going to go through today. The first item is about how to make communication your secret weapon, because it is, and it can be, and everyone should be using their communication to get the best results for them. Then we're going to work through 2 activities that will give you a practical chance to actually practice your communication skills and take them into your work as WASH professionals. So the first one is refining your elevator pitch, and the second activity is telling your story. So without further ado, I want to start off this session by getting an understanding of you guys and the challenges that you're currently facing. So our first content slide is a discussion prompt. I want everyone in the chat right now to answer this question. What's holding you back right now, can be big or small, from achieving your goals? What might be the main barrier that you're facing that's stopping you from taking the next step in your personal journey, your professional journey, your journey with your startup? If you could all just drop a response in the chat, that would be amazing. So we've got pandemic. That is a big challenge. I know a bunch of people are facing that, and especially when we want to launch tangible projects, that can be really hard. Funding's a big one. And I think a big part of how I've used communications has been to increase my legitimacy. So when you're looking for funding, funders typically, their biggest criteria for giving funding is trust. And trust is made up of 2 elements of communication. So the first one is capability, and the second one is character. So when you're trying to prove to someone that you're trustworthy and you should get funded, firstly, you need to show that you're capable and you're competent. And the second thing is your character, which is about showing that you're reliable, you have good intentions, you're compassionate. Now, the most important is actually capability. It's showing that you're competent, you have skills, because if you're capable, people will trust you in the long term. If you have a small slip up in character, they'll still trust you. Whereas with character, it's a less important instinct or driver for trust. If you have a slip up in your capability, but you have really good character, people still won't trust you. So capability is the most important part of that, which we'll come back to later. Self-doubt, that's a really important one, and something we'll talk about in telling your story and how to communicate. But we all feel self-doubt, and I think the best way to combat self-doubt is to talk to your friends and get them to tell you why you should keep going. And I've worked very extensively with Thomas in the past, and supporting your friends is really important for tackling self-doubt. Time constraints, really important. Time, funding and technical capacity. Procrastination. We all procrastinate. That's why I think communications can be really powerful, because you can tell your network that you're doing something, and then you have to hold yourself accountable and keep them updated. All right, those were some great points. Oh, one just came through the chat, which I think is really interesting, which is managing volunteers and teams. Communications can make or break your relationships. And essentially at the end of the day, if you're working with volunteer teams, it's all based on your relationships with your volunteers. And that's, your relationship is a function. Like if you look at it mathematically, it's a direct relationship between the amount of time you spend communicating with someone and the positive way that they rate your relationship with them. So that's something we'll touch on too today. Anything else that you're struggling with? Glossophobia, I'm not sure what that is. Does anyone know what glossophobia is? Taking a bath? Is that glossophobia? Someone's got to answer in the chat, otherwise we'll all be confused for the whole meeting. All right, without fear of public speaking, okay, yeah, I think that's a big one. My sister actually is very afraid of public speaking, and she's doing a PhD at the moment, and when she has to present, she'll come over to me beforehand and I'll do some practice sessions with her. One of the things I get her to do, which I think might be useful for all of you, is before you're doing public speaking, go to a bathroom, look at yourself in the mirror and do power posing. So stretch yourself out really big and then bring it in small. So I get her to do that for about 2 minutes of occupying space in a room, making herself really big. And then I tell her when she gets out there on the stage, she needs to be that big version of herself and she needs to really project and own the stage and just remember that she deserves to be there and she can deliver a really good thing. Because, you know, it's hard public speaking, but if you believe you can do it, it's going to be easier. Okay, getting a lot of responses, even some personal messages, but I might jump into the session because I think it's going to be really interesting to think about how we can use communication to actually tackle these challenges that you're facing every day. So, how can we use communication as a secret weapon? The answer is, if we jump to the next slide, we can use a signature personal type of communication that's unique to you to communicate with our stakeholders around us, with our family, with our friends, with our investors, with our beneficiaries, as our secret weapon to amplify our impact. And there's a few different ways we need to use communication. So typically when you're communicating, you need to think about the receiver of the information and your personal goal with the communication. So I want everyone to think for 2 seconds about who they might be wanting to communicate with and what is their goal for that communication. And on the left here, I've got some examples of what that might be. You might be communicating with someone in a local village and trying to encourage them to use less water or only use water from a specific source or use a new technology. You might be trying to get your friends to take action and particularly to actually join you as a volunteer, or you might be looking to persuade them to take a particular action, to make a donation, to share some of your content. That might be one of your goals. So I want everyone in the chat to make yourself accountable. Type in one person you want to communicate with. Doesn't have to be their name, but it can be either friend, investor, government. And then what is your goal that you want to get them to do? Do you want them to give you guys money? Do you want them to support you through a partnership? What is the goal of your communication with them? So I think one of my goals at the moment with ASEP, which is the ASEAN-Australia Strategic Youth Partnership, is to communicate with big companies. And what I want to communicate to them is that if they give us funding for ASEP, then we'll be able to impact thousands of lives across Southeastern Australia. So I'm trying to persuade them that they should give us money through showing our impact. Our department head, I want to persuade him to resign. How? Oh, well, that comes into the right-hand side of the slide. How are we going to successfully communicate? As you can see in this diagram, there's a few different parts of successful communication. The first one is listening with intent. Now, when you're actually listening to someone, you can pick up subtle clues about what are their motivations, what are their values, how do they make decisions, what expectations do they have on you, what are their goals in life, what are they trying to get out of what they do every day, what are their habits. So maybe you can kind of pick up on what your department head's motivations are. And if it's, you know, maybe they're chasing more money, maybe they're chasing like a quiet retirement, you can subtly kind of inch them towards that and encourage them. But first you need to listen with intent to find out what they're trying to do. The second point is to be confident. Now, how do you actually be confident? I gave the example of your posture, where you can be really big and take up space. Posture really influences how other people perceive you. So I would say that's really important. The second one is a bit more subtle. People don't notice you doing it, or maybe they notice, but on Zoom they would notice, but in person they wouldn't notice as much. And it's called mirroring. So you kind of copy the same kind of actions that the other person on the other side is doing. So for example, if I'm sitting across from John at a cafe and his hands are like this on a table, then I can put my hands in a kind of similar position and adopt the same posture as him. You can also use the same kind of words or repeat back to them elements of what they say in your own language or like in your own phrasing to communicate to them that you're understanding. Another way to be confident is to use this hand signal. When you use this, you really emphasize your point. So, did you know that aging populations in the world expect that in the West, that the population will age by 5 years by 2050? Probably not. But if I say that again with this hand movement, you're going to actually believe it. So ready? By 2050, the average age in the OECD countries is going to be increased by 5 years, from 40 to 45. Aging population will have a huge impact on the world in terms of what infrastructure and services we need. You can just see that kind of specific hand gestures, and there's a video of Barack Obama doing this for like 10 minutes, which you should all watch, can influence how confident you're perceived to be. The next point is ask open-ended questions, and this is really useful when you want to extract information, as I was saying before, when you want to work out someone's values and what they're doing. So an example of an open-ended question is, what are the kinds of companies that you invest in? And then they have to explain how they make their investment decisions. Or what are the key things you look for in your workplace? Might be a question for your department head. The okay hand sign wouldn't work in every culture. That is a great point. If there's specific hand signs that work better in Filipino culture, please enlighten the chat, because that would be really helpful as well, I'm sure. And then the last one is keep in touch. So I know we all have too many contacts these days. So an easy way to keep in touch is actually just posting on your social media. You guys all have friends that are absolute social media tigers. They're posting every week. You know what they're up to. And you have friends who are ghosts. Think about who you're more likely to think of if there's an opportunity. It's probably that person that posts regularly because they're in your feed, they're at the top of your mind, and you're kind of understanding where they might be coming from and what drives them. So I think it's really important to keep in touch. If you can, send direct messages to as many of your contacts you're trying to influence as possible. But if not, just post on social media. So I'll jump into the first exercise, which is about your elevator pitch. Now, this is a 2-minute activity. Everyone has to write an elevator pitch. If we jump to the next slide, your elevator pitch is your first chance at getting people to take you seriously. So the metaphor is you jump in an elevator with someone you've never met, and you have to explain what you do in 3 sentences, in 10 seconds. On the right here, so I'll get you all to post your elevator pitch in the chat. And I just need you to kind of listen while you're writing it, but start writing it now, and I'll kind of explain what to do. So the first sentence needs to be about your purpose. It's why you do what you do. And John and Thomas, I also expect you to drop an elevator pitch in the chat. There's no cheating. So for example, for me, my why is that I want to build friendships between Australian and Southeast Asian youth, because I believe that it makes people happy and it can help bring about peace. Your next sentence needs to be about how you do what you do. This definitely works on stairs. This, like the elevator concept, comes from America, where they use elevators all the time, but this will work when you network with someone for the first time. This is just what you want to say to someone really quickly in 10 seconds. So the first sentence is your purpose. What drives you? What are your values? The second sentence is your how. And as a young person in the development space, this is where you need to show any kind of technical competency, any kind of capability that you have. So for example, Thomas might say, using my engineering skills, or me who studied an arts degree, I might say, using my ability to leverage my networks, or gather views of diverse people, or bring together my community if I don't have a particular technical expertise like engineering or maybe mathematics. And then your third sentence is your what you do. So what you actually do. So it could be like, I run a program that promotes people washing their hands. So those are the 3 sentences that you need to have in your elevator pitch. And I think another part of this is actually trying to make your elevator pitch unique and memorable. So if you can, you try to make it something that will stick in someone's mind. So for example, for Avibat, who's from a 3rd-class town, your purpose might be, the way you frame it is really important. You might be say, hi, I'm Avibat. I grew up in a 3rd-class town, which fueled my purpose to give back to my community. And then the next one is the how you do what you do. So using my knowledge of like digital platforms, that might be your technical expertise. And then your what you do. I promote knowledge of safe and clean water use in my town of 3,000 people. And especially if you can weave some kind of number in there, or the fact that you're from like a 3rd-class town, that can really capture the information, the imagination in someone's brain. And then they'll be able to remember you when it comes up again. So if you've already written your elevator pitch, drop it in the chat. If you've yet to write it, you might have to speed up. You'll have like 5 seconds left. I once went to a networking evening with a really senior politician in Australia called Linda Reynolds, who actually used to be the Minister for Defence. And I gave her my elevator pitch, and she said, it's too boring and it needs to be faster. So this is an opportunity for all you guys to avoid being told that your elevator pitch is boring and that your life's work is not quick enough. So yeah, drop your elevator pitch in the chat if you can. Oh, I love the use of the word galvanize. So we got one through from John Uminga. We want to galvanize young people to contribute to nation building and the global goals through a grassroots youth organization that provides volunteering and skills enhancement opportunities. It's a great one. WMSU PSSE GEM. Build camaraderies throughout our different nations which have the same purpose for betterment. Explore more about the surrounding as well as people and look for the beautiful meaning in it, and advocate young people towards the importance of communicating effectively and positively. That's great. I feel like it's even better if you can add in a more personal point, and this will come in our next activity about storytelling. But for example, the option that Thomas has just given, as a Filipino Australian, I'm driven to provide others with dignified access to water, health, and sanitation. Through Macy Consultants, we achieve this by creating Australia-Philippine platforms that promote capacity building, knowledge sharing, and best practice accessible to all communities. I think to strengthen this a little bit more, Thomas, you should add in your technical ability into the part just before you say through Massey Consultants. And be like, through my previous work in development projects and as an engineer, I started Massey Consultants to promote capacity building, knowledge sharing, and best practice accessible to all communities. So that can be a good opportunity for you. If we can just jump to the next slide. Thank you everyone for sharing your different elevator pitches. We don't have time to do this activity, but I'll let you do it in your own time after, and I'll just briefly touch on why storytelling is really important. So all humans love a good story, and you'll see on your social media every day and in your written communications, you'll find that you're most attracted to read the things that are personal, that are authentic, and that have a story. So they have at the start a complication, a challenge, something that went wrong. Then in the middle, they have a resolution, a solution. And then in the end, there's kind of the impact of that. So where they are now. So the activity was going to be, and I expect you to do this all after this program, is to share a post on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram about this session that you're attending today. So you need to make it interesting and tell a story, and it should start with how you found out about this program or how you started your journey in water and good sanitation. It should also be something that serves others. So you need to know who your audience is on each platform and kind of give a story that will actually help them. So you could take away some of the key points from one of the session and add those as dot points and be like, I learned this, this, and this, so someone else can learn from you. And that comes into the third point as well, which is it should transmit knowledge. So our duty as young leaders is to help other young leaders, and transmitting knowledge is a key part of that. And you can also position yourself as a leader by associating yourself with other young leaders, and also through your commitment and your integrity to your own personal development. If you can, use pictures, graphics, or links. Have a call to action. So at the bottom of your post, you have a specific action that you ask people to do. And usually we try to make them comment on our post, and also post a golden hour. And I've put on the right-hand side some quick tips, but I'm sure you're all great at social media. So our final slide today just has some words that you can use to talk about this program that you went on when you're making your social media post. And I'll put this in the chat in a moment, But I've used up all my time, and I've had such a good time hearing about all the problems that you guys are facing and your stories and your elevator pitches. I really want the one takeaway for you guys to be this line at the top here, which is be consistent. So don't be nervous about sharing your story on social media and to your friends. Share it, refine it. It takes practice. But being a young leader means communicating often and communicating well. So I want to wish you all good luck. And if you have any questions, you can add me on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram, and I'm happy to continue the conversation there. Thanks so much for having me, guys.
Thank you, Hayley. Can we have heart reacts, please, or thumbs ups for Hayley's very quick but very insightful presentation? Okay, that's great. Thanks, Hayley, for reminding us about the importance of being able to communicate well, especially with the advocacy work that we're doing. So just a quick review of what Hayley emphasized and highlighted, the importance of intentionality when it comes to communication. You have to be able to pinpoint your purpose for communicating. That really resonates with me very well as a nonprofit founder myself. Sometimes we just find ourselves posting or releasing different materials on social media, and there's really an importance of asking ourselves, is this for the general public that we're posting, or is this for the young people? And these are two different audiences, and we have to be able to make sure that we're able to identify which one we're trying to communicate. And also, Hayley mentioned about the importance of power posting and being able to come up with a pitch. Hopefully, each of us has a pitch that's ready every time we meet with people, funders, partners, fellow advocates, or even volunteers, right? Because a lot of times we meet them at the most unexpected time. And yeah, I think we have a time for, do we have a time for a quick question? Can I see a nod from Thomas? Is it a yes or a no? I think based from the time, yeah, we still have 5 minutes actually. So if Hayley can stay for a bit and if we are able to get a question from the participants, please feel free to send in any question that you might have. But I think I have my first question for you, Hayley. And this is around cross-cultural communication skills. Because I know that you have been dealing with your work in ASIP, which is Australia Southeast Asian Youth Organization. You're talking to a lot of people from different cultures, Malaysians, Filipinos, Burmese, etc., etc. And these people have different cultures and contexts. Um, do you find it challenging communicating to them? And what's your strategy basically to ensure that you're communicating well, communicating enough, and you're not, I mean, you're doing it properly, because we all know that when you do communications, it has to be targeted, it has to be well intentioned as well.
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer is sometimes you're going to make big mistakes. For example, once I worked with an Indonesian colleague and I made a joke and they didn't take it very well at all. So it's a learning process. But I think the biggest thing comes back to the listening intently. So if you can listen and understand their values, and as I said before, if you can build trust through your being consistent, then that can really help. But I think listening would be the most important tip I would give for cross-cultural communication. You can learn a lot through observing other people.
Yeah, that's a great answer, Hayley. The importance of, I think, communication, especially during the first few times that you're meeting people, it's really about rapport building, trust building. And there's such a thing called oversharing as well. So sometimes people get off when you are oversharing for the first time that you met. So that's also a tip from my end. And actually today we learned about a new word, which is glossophobia. I just like to emphasize that being nervous or being nervous when doing public speaking is natural as well. Personally, I've been hosting a lot of events with my work. I was involved with Go Negosyo before. We've been doing a lot of conferences all around the country, big conferences, thousands of participants. And it's always normal to be nervous at first. But as shared by Hayley, there are strategies to address that. Doing power posing, to go to the bathroom and shout and try to modulate your voice, try to prepare yourself and really make sure that I think it's really about the preparation as well. So a lot of it is preparation. Um, do we have questions from the chat box?
I can see
Okay.
one question about how to deliver your goal whilst also trying to tell a story.
Okay.
And my actual tip is, you know how in a fairy tale, you kind of start out with a lot of context. I think if you're in a verbal or online communication setting, like not in a storytelling setting, like not telling a story to your kids, you actually need to quickly at the start of the story, insert the answer. So insert the goal. So you need like, oh, I have this really great story to tell you about what we've been working on and why we're looking for $3,000 of funding this year to help us make more impact. And then you start the story, you start the context. So you say the goal at the very start, and then you go back through the normal storytelling of setting, the middle of the story, the resolution, and what the goal is at the end. But if you can put it at the front, that's called, it's like inverted triangle communication. Triangle is the one you want. So you put the goal at the top and then you have all the supporting information at the bottom, rather than the typical fairy tale, which is like this, which has all the context at the top.
Thank you, Hayley, for that. Thank you, Paul, for the question from Earthshaker. I think just to end the session, communication is really important for all of us as change makers. It makes people, we're able to move people to action. We make them inspired, and also we make them um, do something around what we're doing as well. So once again, Hayley, thank you for your time this afternoon. It's already, I think 5 p.m. in Australia, wherever you are, or 6. Are you in Perth or Melbourne? But
I'm in Perth.
we're in Perth, yeah. So thank you once again to Hayley for sharing your expertise as well and for mentoring our participants this afternoon.
So can we just take one photo? If that's
Oh,
okay. Josh, can you take a photo, please? Thanks, everyone.
Let's have a photo.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you so much again, Hayley. Really appreciate it. And I'm sure everyone valued it as well. Thank you. And I think, John, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Hayley. At this juncture, I think we're able to catch up on time, which is good. I'd like to introduce our next two speakers for session 2 of UN Sustainable Goals 4 and 6. So where to from here? So we have a couple of gentlemen, Yang Villa and engineer Rolando Santiago. I'll be introducing them, both of them at this point. So Yang Villa is a water expert and head of the Philippines of Isle Utilities. He has 10 years of experience developing water infrastructure projects in the Philippines. He's also led the establishment of the nationwide collaborative innovation program, which launched initiatives such as the Water Technology Summit, the Confluence Innovation Leadership Forum, and several technology trials. He is an active member of the International Water Association and was appointed as the youngest conference president of the IWA Efficient Urban Water Management Conference Series. He co-founded the Philippine Young Water Professionals and is a prolific mentor to youth organizations. In ISLE, Young is motivated to advance technologies that help conserve and sustain our natural resources. Our second speaker for this session is Engineer Rolando Santiago. Engineer Santiago obtained 2 degrees in tertiary education, a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering, and a Bachelor of Science in Environmental and Sanitary Engineering. He also finished 2 master's degrees, Master in Management, Major in Public Administration, and Master of Public Health. Engineer Santiago had also attended local and international training related to environmental sanitation and public health, water, sanitation, and hygiene, and program on zero open defecation or ZOD. Currently, Engineer Santiago is a supervising health program officer and the technical staff of sanitation program at Environmental Health and Safe Settings Division, Disease Prevention and Control Bureau of our Department of Health. So Yang will kick off the session to be followed by Engineer Rolando. Q&A will follow afterwards. Take it away, please, Mr. Yang Villa.
Awesome. Thank you very much. All right. I hope you can hear me well and you can see my screen. But before all of that, can I just say I am so excited to be here. And I barely caught Hayley's final part of the talk. And she talked about a pitch, personal pitch. And let me share you mine. My personal pitch is that I am on a mission to develop the leadership potential of as many young people as can be crammed in my lifetime. Simple as that. And I hope that after today's little talk about water development and the role of young leaders, you will appreciate the intersection of water, sanitation, and hygiene, its role in development, and what you as young professionals and young leaders can do to support this endeavor. I have three key messages this afternoon. First is that water and sanitation they're not just related, they're not just loosely linked, but they are inextricably linked. And they are key determinants of social and economic outcomes. The second is that in the Philippines, there is a huge gap, unfortunately, in water and sanitation investment, but there are some drivers for improvement. And finally, I want to talk about how I say we loosely because I'd like to think of myself as forever young, but we the youth, but you in particular, have an obligation to not just participate, but to lead the shaping of our water future. I want to begin with a familiar concept to everyone. I'm sure everyone knows about SDG 6, and I will not be going around talking about the 8 targets of SDG 6. I trust that you are quite familiar with this, but basically SDG 6 is our clean water and sanitation SDG. But what I really want to emphasize here is the perspective or framework that helps us understand SDG 6. The thing you need to understand about SDG 6 and why it matters and why it's different from MDG, the Millennium Development Goals, is that SDG 6 seeks to redefine our relationship with water. We have to understand that the water cycle is not just a linear process, rather it is a complex system of systems. I understand that in most schools, many of us were taught that the hydrological cycle is this way. You have evaporation, you have precipitation, and then there's abstraction and use, etc. It's kind of a linear process. And it's taught in that very technical manner. And even in most schools, when you go to more advanced hydrological discussions, it's very technical. And unfortunately, over the last decades of the water profession, much of the water professionals are focused on the science and engineering part of it, without really understanding the place of water professions and water professionals in the larger society. So when we say that water is a complex system of systems, we mean that water interacts with all aspects of the natural, biophysical, and very important, social world as well. And therefore, we must manage it in an integrated manner. That's why, as you can see, 6.5 goal target is integrated water management. Now, you will hear me a lot, and I'm sure you're familiar with this concept of why we talk about both water and sanitation. Is this something that you may be familiar with? And I just want to look back at the attendees. Can you put a thumbs up if you're familiar with this diagram? This is what we call the F diagram. The reason why we call F diagram is all of the boxes begin with the letter F. That's feces, fluids, fields, flies, fingers, foods, but new host is not. But in the parlance of the water sector, we like to call it the pardon my French, the shit diagram. And what this shows you are all the pathways that human waste can transmit diseases. What you'll notice here is that safe water acts as a minimal barrier to fluids alone. But without proper sanitation, meaning having toilets, then it's not as effective. And in fact, the first line of defense should be the toilet barrier. And towards the latter part, even if we miss the toilet barrier and the safe water barrier, we need to have hygiene for this entire flow to be disrupted. This relationship is so important that the UN says that the benefits of having access to an improved drinking water source can only be fully realized when there's also access to improved sanitation and adherence to good hygiene practices. That's why SDG 6, targets 6.1 and 6.2 in particular, pertain to universal access to water and sanitation, and that makes hygiene possible. So that's why you will be hearing a lot of us talking about water, sanitation, and hygiene, or WASH, all together. Sometimes you'll hear us say just the water sector, but this is really what we're talking about. All three are interrelated. Now, WASH determines key development outcomes. It's not just about putting toilets and making that available to people. It's also about making sure that they use it properly and that we achieve certain social goals. For example, we know that WASH influences health and nutrition because, as we've seen in the F diagram, that prevents diseases, it promotes balanced diet as well, and it provides healthcare for the sick. Imagine going to a hospital and being told, "I'm sorry, ma'am, sir, there is no water in this hospital." And that, unfortunately, is true for many healthcare facilities in the developing world. In terms of education, children who have access to water, sanitation, and hygiene have higher rates of school enrollment and attendance. Imagine being a young girl in the rural areas and being asked by your parents to go fetch water. Obviously, you will need to take time off from school to be able to do that on a daily basis. WASH also determines outcomes in terms of poverty, inequality, such as productivity of workers, because healthy workers are productive workers. Livelihood is also an important benefit of WASH, because when WASH systems are localized and community-based, it provides jobs to people. And equal access or non-discriminatory access is also an important equality factor. And speaking of equal access, WASH helps us ensure gender equity. For example, in terms of menstrual health of women and girls, security of women and girls, for example, in going out at night to be able to access sanitation facilities, and of course, the rights of transgender people. If you're familiar with the donut diagram of the SDGs, this is just a visual representation of how SDG 6 is foundational to achieve all the other SDGs. We're not saying here that SDG 6 is the most important, because obviously all the SDGs are interrelated and interconnected. What we're saying is that it's important to ensure universal access to water, sanitation, and hygiene for us to have improved outcomes in society and the economy. That's why SDG 6 is here at the base or foundation of what we call the wedding cake diagram of the SDGs. Another point I want to talk about is how adequate and safely managed water and sanitation is the basis for a circular economy. You may be familiar with the sanitation value chain, as you can see here on the top portion. And most areas have toilets, have some sort of containment, for example, septic tanks, but very few have emptying, transporting, and treatment facilities for your fecal sludge. And that's why pollution happens, and that's why you still have the prevalence of many fecal diseases. But most importantly, if treated properly, then our sanitation value chain can actually be the basis for reuse and disposal of resources that we can recover from our wastewater. I'm going to leave this link over here. It's such a fascinating video, short film to watch. I hope that you will have time after this to watch this. But here is a list of common resources that we can recover from the wastewater. Things including materials such as construction materials, bioplastics, heavy metals, but also nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, biosolids, protein that can be used for agriculture, for example, but also energy like biodiesel and biogas. So the only way that we can recover these resources from our wastewater is if we had the entire value chain of sanitation in place. Now, one thing that people don't understand is that water is actually behind economic growth. And I call it the hidden fuel of the economy. The Philippines, as we all know, is a largely agricultural economy. And in terms of water use, irrigation accounts for 70 to 80% of all water use in the Philippines. As you can see here in this pie chart, as of June 2018, irrigation takes up about 70% of all water use in the country, followed by industrial, and municipal is actually less than 10%. So if we don't have water provided for our farmers, then our economy could be in danger. But that's not all. In areas where there is high water scarcity, then industrial and commercial growth is also slow. Here you can see the GDP value add of industrial subsectors. What are your biggest industrial and manufacturing production subcenters? These are your F&B, food manufacturing, beverage industries, textile, tobacco, etc. And all of these are heavy water users. That's why, as any LGU official would know, if you want to develop the industrial commercial capacity of your city or municipality, you have to ensure the availability of reliable water. So water is not just important for agriculture, but also for our industries. But the question is, where is the water? So water, as we all know, is very topography or geography specific. And some regions in the Philippines have more water, like region 10, comparatively relative to their water demand. However, most of our regions are water scarce in that they will have or suffer a deficit as of 2025. And some of them are already suffering from deficits now. So in conclusion of the first part, the key message here is that water and sanitation, as well as hygiene, these are all inextricably linked to each other. And they are determinants not just of economic outcomes, but also of social development. I want to focus in a little bit more on the Philippine context. Now, what is our situation in terms of water supply and sanitation? The good news is that we met the Millennium Development Goals, which is to have the population of that do not have access to safely to improved water supply. However, a significant chunk of our population still have no piped water access into their premises. So either they only have a standpipe or they have to collect it from another source. And majority of that population or subpopulation are concentrated in the urban areas. I come from Ilocos Norte, and in the barangay that I live in, my parents do have very scarce access to water supply, and we don't have piped water supply at that. And over 300 municipalities around the country continue to be waterless out as of December 2015. The sanitation picture is even less hopeful. Around 74% of households are connected to on-site or off-site treatment and are considered safely managed. But that means about 30% of households around the country still do not have on-site treatment. They may have toilets, but they're not being cleaned. And around 4.3 million Filipinos still practice open defecation. Now, this is alarming for all the reasons we discussed earlier, because without proper sanitation, then health outcomes are compromised as well as social and economic outcomes. So what do we need to fill in this gap? This is a very early estimate by NEDA of the investment requirement that we need to plug the water and sanitation requirements of the Philippines from 2019 to 2030. If you sum these numbers, this is about 1 trillion pesos. How much is being spent, you ask me? Not nearly enough, and certainly not going to reach this much by 2030. And we need to mobilize more funds to go into water supply and sanitation. Even worse, much of this capital investment is being put into urban areas, or in other words, the richer areas of the country. So there are inequalities in terms of access to drinking water as well as sanitation, not only between countries in East and Southeast Asia, but also within the countries. The right-hand side here is a breakdown of the Philippines. So as you can see, there is higher prevalence of access to basic drinking water in urban areas, in the amongst the richest quintile, and in national capital region. Those are not to be expected. But who's being left behind? Those living in the rural areas, the poorest of the poor, and the autonomous region of Muslim Mindanao. So a lot of the investment that needs to go into water supply and sanitation have to be redirected into these left behind areas for them to catch up. Now, not everything is doom and gloom. There is some hope and there are some drivers for improvement, and there are many, but I want to emphasize two trends here. The first is public-private partnerships, or PPPs. Now, PPP is a type of private sector participation where a private company or investor enters into a contractual arrangement or agreement with a public entity, in this case, an LGU, like your cities or your province, or the water district, your local nawasa, as we like to call them, to undertake a specific business scope. For example, to improve water supply, to expand water network coverage, or to have a wastewater project in the city or municipality. On screen, you will see some of the very active PPP investors and private sector participants who are investing their money around the country. You will see some familiar names like Maynilad and Manila Water, as well as Prime Water and Balibago, but also less known private players like Suma Water Resources, Tubig Pilipinas, Apo Agua, Metro Pacific Water. However, will the private sector always be the solution to the water and sanitation gap? And the answer is no. Because for many of these investors, they're looking for return on investment. And where will you find that? Obviously, in the richer, urbanized areas and regions. You will not find them investing in the smaller towns around the country. So the government still has a role to play in terms of investment in water supply and sanitation. The other drawback of PPPs is that while it can accelerate investment in water supply and sanitation, it can also lead to higher tariff or water rates that consumers will have to pay. So these are the trade-offs that we have to consider when we are faced with PPP projects and opportunities. The second driver for improvement that I sincerely believe young people can have a role to play in is in technology and innovation. This is the process of adopting new technologies to help operators and service providers improve operational efficiency, service delivery, financial sustainability, and environmental outcomes. On screen, what you see is a selection of the highest or top ranked utility needs. This is a result of a survey that we conducted in 2016-2017 amongst the water districts in the Philippines. And you have concerns such as water source development, especially for those who are already facing water deficit or can expect water deficit in the future. Water treatment is still a problem because many water sources are not fit for drinking. Prime example in Metro Manila is Pasig River. It's right next to us, but we cannot tap it for drinking use. Wastewater management, because there are still so many cities which do not have sewered network for wastewater treatment and collection. Non-revenue water is when you have high levels of leakage, which leads to wastage of water. Smart water technology to make our operations more efficient. And as mentioned earlier, resource recovery, which would help us achieve a circular economy. But there are so many other areas for research and development that you as young professionals can be part of. This includes environmental remediation, water resource protection. Non-sewered sanitation is a particularly exciting field because this is sanitation management that does not require a sewer connection. So on-site treatment, for example, or off-grid treatment. Behavior change is also an important part. Because it's not enough for us, as I mentioned earlier, to be providing the infrastructure. You also need to convince people to use the infrastructure. You can have a pump, you can have a hand pump or a toilet, in an area, but if people don't like it or people are not inclined to use it, then it's practically useless. Another area for R&D in the Philippines is irrigation efficiency. As we've seen, 70% of water use is in the agricultural sector. So if we find a way for the agricultural sector to be more efficient in its water use, then we're helping the rest of the country. Rainwater harvesting has always been an opportunity for us. We are in the tropics, and yet we do not maximize all the rainfall that we gather. And finally, nature-based solutions to help us mitigate effects of climate change, for example, or the inflexibility of gray infrastructure. Now, I know this is just a taster, and I understand you will have these slides. And if any of these topics are of interest to you, I strongly recommend that you do your research and engage in more discussions about them. So there goes my second message, that in the Philippines, there remains a huge gap in water sanitation investment, but there are some drivers for improvement, particularly private sector investment and technology and innovation. So the question is, what can you do as young people? And I think the formula here is SDG 6 plus SDG 4 equals SDG 10. No, I'm kidding. Equals a water-wise world. As we all know, SDG 4 has to do with quality education, ensuring inclusivity and equitable quality education. And this is the part that I really like, promoting lifelong learning opportunities for all, including young water professionals, especially those already in the water profession. Learning does not stop. How do we do this? What is a water-wise world? How can we be more aware about our relationship to water? And how can we not just use water efficiently, but also to promote water education, water consciousness, and water awareness? The IWA's 17 Principles for Water-Wise Cities provides a blueprint for how cities and communities can achieve water-wise communities, and I strongly encourage you to visit this link as well. And this diagram that you see on the right-hand side is a picture version of those 17 principles. But let me emphasize 3 things that are related to SDG 4. Number 1, to teach water consciousness as early as possible and in an integrated manner. This means that we don't wait until high school to talk about water awareness or water consciousness. We talk about this as early as we can during grade school to show appreciation so that our school children can show appreciation to their water environment around them. And we also do this in an integrated manner, meaning, as we've seen, not just as a science topic, but as an economics topic, as a social sciences topic, as a civics topic, even as a humanities and arts topic, because I think that's what's missing in terms of public communication and engagement, as Hayley was talking about earlier. The second is to promote water awareness in all sectors, not just the water industry. And let me tell you why. Because traditionally, people in the water sector are engineers who are working for water utilities. And that was so limiting because I personally am not an engineer. I'm an economist by training. But now our understanding of the water profession is so much bigger than just engineering solutions. There's all kinds of professions in the water sector now. So there is a place for you here, and there's a place for you to contribute. That's why we need this. We need to break the silos in the water industry. But more importantly, you don't need to work in a water utility to be a water professional. If you work for an F&B company, if you work for a mining company, if you work for a textile company, if you work for a call center company, all of these industrial and commercial pursuits need water or influence water in one way or another. It's your job to find out how, and it's your job to find out how best to contribute. That's how you can participate in a water-wise city or water-wise world. And finally, for those of us who are interested in water and development, we need to continuously expand our skills and competencies so that we can continue to pursue lifelong learning opportunities. I want to end by having a call to action to all of you. As I said, this is just a taster of what we do in this little organization that we call the Philippine Young Water Professionals. We are nationwide in focus. PIPE as we like to pronounce the acronym PIPE, is the official country chapter of the International Water Association, and we are also the youth arm of the Philippine Water Works Association. It is open for everyone who are 18 years old and above. You just need to be a member of the Philippine Water Works Association. And our agenda in PIPE is to push Water Plus. We say Water Plus because water does not exist on its own. As we said, water is a complex system of systems. So we have discussions such as water plus health, water plus poverty, water plus environment, water plus biodiversity. And so it expands our understanding and consciousness of how we can contribute to water awareness. There goes my third point, which is that the youth have not just a role to play, but actually we have an obligation to not just participate, but to shape the water future. After all of the problems will be inherited by whom? By us. But also, all of the solutions lie with us. But we need to work together. And for that, I invite you to visit these pages, the Facebook page of the Filipino Water Professionals and the IWA Global Young Water Professionals page, both of which I have the pleasure of moderating. And if you'd like to connect, my Twitter is @YoungWaterProfessional. I'm not a professor, @YoungWaterProf, or you can also find me on Facebook and LinkedIn. I thank you so much for your attention, and I look forward to your questions and discussion later. Thank you.
Thank you, Yang, for that very important discussion on the relationship and the correlation of water with a lot of the issues. No, so I think my main key takeaway would be water and sanitation is not just a health issue; it's really more than that. In fact, it's a human rights issue as well. But not to take a lot of time, please ready your questions for Yang. But for now, let's invite Engineer Rolando for his presentation.
Can you see my slides now? Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So thank you for inviting me for this very important forum. And the task that was given to me is to discuss the Zero Open Defecation Program of the Department of Health, and particularly to discuss the strategies and activities of our program in achieving our targets for the SDG to improve the zero open defecation status in the Philippines. Okay. So my first slide is actually a question to everybody. So that does sheet matter? Is it important to discuss the sheet because you invited Engineer Santiago just to discuss about sheet? So my answer on that is yes. Sheet matter. Okay, so we have actually the beliefs, attitudes, behaviors about what is related to water, sanitation, and hygiene. And I would like to share with you what are those beliefs and attitudes and behaviors towards that. So number one, in the parkland areas, most often people says that it's normal for a growing child to be infected by worms. And we know that worms is actually a sanitation-related diseases for the areas or for the people who have no toilets. And another beliefs actually is a strong cultural beliefs on health and illness causation. So in the parkland areas, even they have the illness, they said that, oh, that is actually caused by bad elements, no? But they don't know that it's just only from the poor sanitation and environment. And lastly, there are lots of people doesn't know the importance of having a toilet. In the past, the Department of Health has conducted a survey in the areas where most people are practicing open defecation, and we asked them what are the reasons for having no toilets. And most often, the answers that we received from them, they said that they don't have the money. But these reasons actually seems not valid because for those people saying doesn't have the money, are those people that have money for buying loads, buying cigarettes, and buying wine or liquors. So that is actually contradict to the reasons that they are giving. Okay. We know that improper disposal of human waste poses risk to human waste because number one, it contaminates the water supply sources. And of course, a gram of feces, when you dispose that improperly, it contains 10 million viruses, 1 million bacteria, 1,000 parasite cysts, and 100 parasite eggs, which is very risky to the human health. And in the areas where open defecation is being practiced, and for those people who have no improper hygiene behavior, the lack of appropriate sanitation facilities, it disaggravates actually with lack of appropriate sanitation facilities that lead to contamination of water sources. So the open defecation persisted to the detriment of all in the community, creating a vicious cycle of illness, high expenditure on healthcare, lost work hours, and poverty. So the sanitation status in the Philippines was already given by the previous speaker. We have 4.2 million Filipinos that are still defecating in the open. 4.7 million Filipinos who are using unimproved sanitation facilities. And as of the moment, based on DOH data, we have only 13,113 barangays, or about 31% of 45 barangays in the country are certified zero open defecation communities. So there's still a lot to work to achieve and to get a 100 barangays, COD barangays in the Philippines. And top 3 regions with highest percentage of families with no toilet facilities or still practicing OD are in the regions actually of Barm, Bicol, and Eastern Visayas. And what are we aiming to reach the what are we aiming to reach, and what are the national sanitation target that LGUs should contribute to? So we mentioned here LGUs because the LGUs are the prime mover and the prime implementer of public health programs. So based on the National Objectives for Health 2017-2022, and the Department of Health Administrative Order 2010-0021 on the National Sustainable Sanitation Plan, and Department of Health Administrative Order on 2019-2054 on PATS, or the Philippine Approach to Sustainable Sanitation, local governments units are enjoined to meet the following sanitation targets. By 2022, 53% households have access to safely managed sanitation. By 2022 also, 84% households have access to basic sanitation services. By 2025, we are aiming that 100% of barangays are certified zero open defecation status. And by 2028, 100% of barangays are certified basic sanitation status. And of course, in the end of SDG by 2030, 63% of barangays are certified sustainable sanitation. Okay, discussing with you the components of the Zero Open Defecation Program, there are 3 important elements. Number 1 is the demand creation, the good governance and enabling environment, ensuring supply side through sanitation marketing. So these are 3 very important components of our program to achieve our target. For the Zero Open Defecation Program, the Department of Health is continuing to provide capacity building to help the LGUs to build the competencies in planning and implementing interventions to address open defecation in communities. But before that, I would like to discuss with you how the Department of Health has shifted our approach from traditional to revolutionary approach, because sanitation program in the past Subsidies have been given to households to build standard latrines. The approach has been top-down driven by need to disburse funds, and logistics for sanitation projects have been used for other purposes. Like for example, plastic toilet bowls became now as flower pots, chicken nests, or sink or lavatory. And people provided with toilets have continued to defecate in the open. And with that, the Department of Health shifted our program to revolutionary approach. So I said that to change the traditional approach, CODP utilized community-led approaches which maximize community participation with the aim of empowering communities to make decisions and to take actions in improving their sanitation conditions. We empower communities because they are the one who knows their problems. They are more knowledgeable how to answer and to make solutions to end their open defecation practices. So our strategies actually is the community-led total sanitation. So this is now popularized in almost part of the country because this approach enables communities to analyze their sanitation conditions and their practices of open defecation and collectively internalize the terrible impact of open defecation on public health and on the entire neighborhood environment. And CLTS is an approach sanitation program can take place without hardware being provided or even financed from the outside. So that the key is just facilitation, as simple and direct questions. Like for example, what word do you use for shit? For example, if one local community use ebak or tae, so use that word because in CLTS, the crude word is always used. Where do you shit and what happens to it? So the CLTS triggering process actually is under the premise of shock, shame, and disgust. And with that, we are actually aiming that an urgent collective action to become zero open defecation status of the community. So another activity of the Department of Health actually is the advocacy and communication program. So the Department of Health in partnership with other partner agencies like the World Bank, like the UNICEF, have developed several advisory materials or IEC like the Goodbye to Me, Hello Healthy. And every year, the Department of Health is holding the World Toilet celebration every November 19 and inviting different stakeholders, especially the local government units, because we would like to increase their awareness in taking action to improve their environmental condition. And also part of the ZOD program is the verification and certification of COD status, wherein the declaring COD communities with rewards and incentives. So when the communities are ready to be declared COD status, they will write the municipality or the city verification and certification team that they are now COD and are ready for evaluation and certification, so that the municipality or the city verification team will do verification exercise. And when they find out that the community is really a ZOD community, so they will give a certification, and most open declaration is accompanied by incentives and rewards for collective efforts of the community. Okay. So the Department of Health actually is also developing important policies. So just in 2019, we developed 2 policies. Number 1, this is the policy on national standard on the design, construction, operation, and maintenance of septic tank systems. So we are aiming that all government units, especially when there is an infrastructure or construction of houses in their jurisdiction or in their area, we want them to check the proper design of the toilets. So the salient features of this policy are the septic tank should have 2 chambers. Proper design of septic tank have 2 chambers. And this is the location of septic tank when constructed should be located away from the water sources. and there is a regular dislodging of septic tank and materials prohibited to discharge the septic tank. So that are the salient features of that policy. So another policy actually is the Philippine approach to sustainable sanitation. So we call that PATS. PATS policy is a step-by-step approach that guided LGUs on how to track the sanitation situation of each community and take supportive action to ensure that no one is left behind without access to a sanitary toilet. While the said policies and standards are set by DOH at the national level, the local government units are at the forefront of implementing this to support their respective local sanitation programs. Thus, the task to make each barangay and eventually each municipality a ZOD area lies in the hands of local government officials. So why do we need to implement the Philippine approach to sustainable sanitation? Number one, because it converts the national sanitation goals into doable steps, combination of programmatic approaches, technologies, and services that need to be put in place based on the specific context of each geographical unit. And also a verification and certification mechanism that tracks the sanitation situation of each community. And lastly, the local government unit assessment of the performance to take supportive action and mobilize resources towards the improvement of sanitation conditions. Okay, so just to discuss with you, what is the approach to Philippine approach to sustainable sanitation? Actually, this is a step-by-step approach in helping communities journey towards sustainable sanitation. So we have 4 grades: the grade 0, which is the open defecation; the grade 1, the zero open defecation; the grade 2, the basic sanitation; and the grade 3, the sustainable sanitation. So the grade 0 actually is a community where human excreta dispose into open spaces, drains, or bodies of water. So meaning these are the people who are practicing open defecation. They have the toilet, but still because of their behavior, they are still practicing open defecation. So for the ZOD barangay from grade 0 to grade 1, because of the interventions like the demand creation in changing behaviors, no one is practicing open defecation. Inspire community action and set the social norms. So what is the social norms? We would like that all the people in the community will no longer do the open defecation practice. We want them to use the toilet in defecation, and 100% of households have access to functional toilets. And grade 1 to grade 2 for basic sanitation, this is ensuring wash facilities in institutions. So the indicators are 100% of households have their own sanitary toilets. All schools have safe, functional, and gender segregated toilets. All child development centers have at least one age-appropriate sanitary toilet that is safe and functional. All other public institutional facilities have at least one functional sanitary toilet. Proper solid waste management and existence of local ordinance on animal excreta management and waste sectoral plan should be incorporated in any development plan. So the highest grade actually is the grade 3, from grade 2 to grade 3, which is sustainable sanitation. In this grade, we would like to ensure the availability of safely managed sanitation services, which is an indicator for the SDG. So our indicators for this level is 100% improved toilet facilities in households and government institutions, wash plants, wastewater and septic sewerage management, water safety planning, water quality management, and solid waste management. Okay, so there are 3 important pillars for the PATS. So number 1 is the participatory demand creation. The activities on that is advocacy with local chief executives and other local officials. We would like to make local government units to realize and have the desire to invest in environmental and sanitation-related activities towards behavior change. We do also triggering the minds of LCEs on the significance of toilets through community-led total sanitation approach. and a strong link between communities and WAS implementers. The second pillar actually is the enabling environment. So the activities on that is WAS coordinating body. We would like that LGUs would create a WAS coordinating body that would see in implementing the program. Also, we are aiming that LGUs will craft local ordinances and policies because a program without policies or ordinances will not move. Documenting effective pilot interventions and setting ground for replication and involving communities in the process of decision making. So the sanitation pillars number 3 is strengthening of supplies and services. The activities on that is investing in products and services in making this more accessible, access to microfinancing, strengthening access to credit for business development and households, and expanding from mere supply availability to actual service provision such as training and sanitation marketing. Okay, so the strategies for COD is strengthening of political will of local government officials and health executives, strengthening of sanitation governance and regulatory mechanisms, enforcement of laws and ordinances at local levels, extensive efforts in advocacy, IEC, behavior change and communication, and we will see on these strategies the help of our young professionals. Improving service delivery through capacity development and forming strategic alliances of multi-sectoral and multi-level stakeholders for financing and adequate sanitation infrastructure investments. So how would you start? For example, for the LGU, how would they start? So become a WAS warrior, put sanitation program in the local action plan, organize their WAS task force, allocate funds to WAS programs, and move families to build toilets. So also part of our program of strategies of the Department of Health sorry. Okay, so part of our strategies is the advocacy activities like for the ZOD declaration and the barangay with best sanitation practices and the most improved LGUs with environmental sanitation services. So these advocacy activities actually is recognizing the collective effort of the local government units in improving their sanitation condition. Okay, so the program structure who will undertake the zero open defecation program. So the CODP Local Action Committee, so the LGU through the City Health Office, Municipal Health Office, and the sanitary inspectors and other LGU department. So the barangay officials, including the barangay sanitation volunteers, including the barangay health workers and community members. The Provincial Health Office and the Department of Health, we call that DMOs or the DOH representatives. Of course, the program partners, if they have partners in their areas, like for example, the NGOs, local entrepreneurs and lending institutions and dislodgers and masons, this is actually a big help in implementing the program. So the important factors in targeting COD status, the zero open defecation status is critical to the goal of achieving health for all Filipinos. So it is also important that data about open defecation should be made available because when speaking to local leaders, data, information, and knowledge are needed to present the gravity of the situation. Like for example, how many households have no toilets? How many are practicing open defecation? What are the reasons for not constructing toilets? Status of sanitation-related diseases? How many toilets are needed to construct and what are the strategies that will be used for toilet construction? Data are vital for program planning. And there is a need to strengthen the information and reporting system on COD at all levels of public health services for program monitoring and planning. And lastly, there is a need to harmonize sanitation program activities and different approaches from various agencies and stakeholders because the Department of Health cannot do it alone. LGU should be consulted for a unified approach strategies. So the DOH moving forward to achieve the ZOD Philippines, we converge our investments with other partners. We develop national protocol and establish supporting mechanism, documentation of best practices, institutionalization of programs based from local experiences and strategic plan. Of course, conduct capacity building for sanitation and incentives for sanitation program. So that COD status is achievable when empowerment of families, communities, local government, and other sanitation stakeholders. COD also is achievable when there is an affordable, appropriate, and dynamic sanitation technologies supported by legal and regulatory framework, management systems, and technical assistance from various sources, and access to financing mechanisms for COD projects. Okay, that's all in a nutshell, the COD program of the Department of Health. Thank you very much and good afternoon again to everyone.
Thank you, Engineer Santiago, for such an enlightening talk about Zero Open Defecation campaign of the government, particularly the Department of Health, and of course, the role of the different stakeholders as well, like the local government units. I think these sessions really feed well into one another, with Engineer Santiago talking about the role of the government and Yang, who was talking about the role of the industry and also the young people and other youth organizations. May we invite, we have some time for a few questions, 1 to 2 questions, I think. May we invite Engineer Rolando and Mr. Yang Villa back to the plenary. So again, just to reiterate, if you guys have questions, feel free to pop them in the chat box. But for now, I believe we received a couple of questions sent anonymously or directly to our team. The first question, I think both Yang and Engineer Santiago can address this. For those who don't have much experience in the water and sanitation space, what is that one call to action you'd like to emphasize from today's session? Can I call Yang to start the open forum?
Sure, that speaks to me a lot too, because I started out certainly more than 10 years ago as somebody with absolutely no experience in the water sector. I almost landed here by accident, actually, in the water profession. But it's knowing that there is a calling in this sector that made me stick with it. So if you're truly desiring to make a difference and to commit, then you would want to start by engaging more with the senior professionals, with like-minded individuals. And that's why we formed the Philippine Young Water Professionals, because we want you to find the same group of people, young people, who will help you throughout that journey. So don't be spooked by the fact that you're just starting out, because it is a journey, and you better start now.
Thank you, Yang, for that answer. I think that's also a personal question on my end because I founded a youth nonprofit. And right now, I learned and realized that there's really a lot of work to be done in the space of water and sanitation. I think let's ask also Dr. Santiago for his thoughts on the question.
Okay. So, Engineer Santiago. Okay. So, my answer actually is it begins from the family or from the community. For example, if a young professional will set themselves as an example, they can contribute a lot. For example, in the community, it can give advice for to their neighborhood who are practicing open defecation. That is actually will go a long way. For example, telling them the good and the bad results of doing or practicing open defecation. That will be a good result, and that will make a lot in disseminating our goals and objective to attain the ZOD Philippines. It starts from everyone actually.
Thank you, Engineer. I think just a curious question from my end as well. Do we have people practicing ZOD in urban areas like Caloocan City, for example, where I'm from? Is it an issue? Is it much an issue as it is in the rural areas?
Actually, in our training that we are conducting, we are actually showing a video showing people from the urban still practicing open defecation. There's a lot actually, especially, for example, their houses are located near coastal or rivers. They have the toilets, for example, but the toilet is unimproved. That is actually a practice of open defecation because they pollute the water. So there's still a lot of people doing that practice. So even in the urban.
Thank you for that, engineer, for the enlightenment. Um, we have a question from Paul of Earthshaker. And the question goes, do you think that by the year 2030, we would have successfully achieved our SDG 6 targets and sustainable sanitation plans? I know from conversations with international organizations that were saying we will not be able to achieve the SDGs in general by 2090s. But do you have your thoughts specifically for SDG 6?
Well, of course, we are always hoping for the best, no? As I always saying, so the Department of Health cannot do it alone. We need a cooperation from each other, no? Because there are also other agencies who have the stake on sanitation. If all these agencies will go together, harmonize their efforts, I think there will be no waste of efforts and resources. And lastly, we need the cooperation of the people on the ground, the LGUs, because they are the prime movers of this program. If these LGUs will have just only an ordinances, no, an ordinances, and implementing these ordinances strictly, I think it is possible to achieve our aim for the SDG.
Thank you, engineer. How about you, Yang? Do you have thoughts about it?
I agree with that perspective to be optimistic because obviously we're doing our best in the sector and all the allies and stakeholders. We're trying to do our best. But two things. Number one, the COVID-19 pandemic has really hit the sector very, very badly. Even the most stable of the utilities that we thought were going to weather this have really squeezed their revenues, have really suffered through investments, and it has set them back on their 2030 SDG targets. Second is that Engineer Rolando touched on a very important point, which is even if we have the best of plans, if the stakeholders don't get their act together, it's going to be very hard to mobilize on a concerted effort towards one direction. And NEDA puts together a water management, a water plan, a national water plan. Um, but the problem is there are over 30 government agencies involved in the water sector. And many of those supposedly contiguous functions or dependent or related functions are separated across so many of these actors and stakeholders. And without a singular entity to really guide us through this implementation, it's very, very hard to do a concerted effort towards SDG 6 implementation. The Department of Water, I just want to raise it out there, has been on the works for so many years. And the entirety of the sector, as far as I know, is behind this plan and have been trying to flesh out what the Department of Water is going to look like, what their powers are, responsibilities, who will take on what will happen to LUA, what will happen to all of these other NWRB. And there have been significant discussions within the sector. I think the problem is that it hasn't really met a lot of legislative backing. So if there is any advocacy that water professionals should get behind immediately, I think it is the formation of the Department of Water as soon as possible if we want to accelerate everything that we wish to achieve by 2030.
Thank you, Yang. Just a curious question again. Is there already a bill pending bill on the legislation around Department of Water, or?
There are two versions of the Department of Water, and I guess that's also where the sector stakeholders differ, because they have different interpretations of what mandates Department of Water should have. One school of thought maintains the LUA MWSS distinction. Another school of thought says no, we should normalize, meaning standardize our regulation of all water utilities. There should be no LUA, NWRB, MWSS distinction. And these are very, very contentious discussions, and not just because of the politics, but also because these three agencies have very, very different regulatory frameworks. It's hard to harmonize them. So I understand why it's difficult. But legislation is there. It's a matter of getting the stakeholders to come together and iron the details out, which is
Thank
easier
you.
said than done.
Yeah, that's true. This is a really important conversation to have, and we have been receiving a lot of questions so far. But we're not able to accommodate all of them. But I guess for the last one for this afternoon, since I think majority of the participants in our call this afternoon are actually students or young professionals, do you have tips or recommendations to them as to how they could be able to advocate for wash and sanitation, whether or not they're in the water industry later on after college, for example? Can we have Engineer Santiago, please, for the first answer?
I think we can, yes, I think our young professionals, even they are not in the sanitation and water industry, they can also still help our, I can say the government in promoting the water and sanitation program. Like for example, they are, of course, we have the gadgets, we have now our technologies. For example, they can use that in their promotion, no? Just in a simple messages that can share to their friends or they can share to their community. Again, I say that it will make a lot. So that's my simple message to our young professionals.
Thank you, Engineer. And Mr. Yang?
I really like that question. I can see that our audience have a bias for action. Like, what can I do now? And I'm so glad that if there's anything you can take away from our talk today, it's not facts or figures. It is that call to action. So this is one action that you can do immediately after this talk. Find out if in your city or municipality you have a water district. Or if you don't, who is in charge of your water utility? Most of the time it's a water district. There are over 600 water districts in the Philippines. If you don't have one, it's probably your LGU, your municipality or your city managing a waterworks system. Or if not, in some cases, special cases, it could be a private provider like Prime Water, Manila Water, or their subsidiaries. Find out who your water service provider is and ask them for their water sector plan. It's as easy as that. Read through that water sector plan, and all LGUs, by the way, need to have a water sector plan. All water districts should make that available as well. Not so with the private players. They're not mandated to provide that to the public, but you can still approach them and ask. And the reason why you need to understand their water sector plan is because you want to know what their targets are. Number two, are they fully funded to reach those targets? Number three, what do they need to achieve those targets aside from funding? Sometimes the problem isn't funding. As I said, our private sector investors are awash with cash, but sometimes the problem is more than cash. So understand the water sector plan for your community and for your municipality and city, and start from there. When you start asking questions on those sector plans, then I think you can find a way to advocate for more detailed, targeted advocacies.
Thank you so much, Yang and Engineer Rolando, for that very engaging conversation. We wish we have more time, but we don't. For the people whose questions have not been answered, we will send them to Mr. Yang and Engineer. If you could kindly provide your answer, that would be great. But once again, let's give a round of applause to our two resource speakers for session 2 for sharing their experiences and expertise. I really think this is a great session that we have had. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Can we kindly take a photo before Yang and Engineer Rolando leave? Awesome. Thanks so much. Josh, are you able to take a photo, please? Awesome. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Good. Thank you so much. And we'll share that around. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Engineer Rolando, and thank you, Yang. I'll hand it back to you, John, to introduce our third and final speaker.
Thank you. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you once again, and more power to our research speakers. For our third and final speaker for day one, for session 3, Introduction to Environment and Sanitation Law, I'd like to welcome Attorney Raoul Creencia of CCV Law. I hope I pronounced it correctly. Sir Raoul is recognized as a leader in public and private collaboration due to his experience in managing and leading successful PPPs across a number of major government contracts. This includes public infrastructure projects across energy, agriculture, transportation, and water sectors. During his career, he was appointed Government Corporate Counsel of the Office of the Government Corporate Counsel, or OGCC, and served as chief lawyer of all government corporations of the country. In 2016, he served as Undersecretary of the Department of Transportation, and during his tenure, he reviewed major concession agreements and other contracts between the government and private sector. I'd like to invite Mr. Raoul, Attorney Raoul, to kick off the session, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope I am coming in loud and clear. Let me just share my screen. All right, I hope everybody can see the screen that I have shared to everyone. Again, good afternoon. And thank you, Macy Consultants, for this invite. It's a pleasure always to be in the midst of young minds. And I actually heard witnessed the exchange of questions and answers with our two resource speakers earlier. And I'm already in love with the audience. All right, for our final discussion and conversation this afternoon, let me just make this light and easy for all of you. This is not a law subject. This is not a law class. This is not a law lecture. But let me walk you through a survey and give you a survey of relevant environmental and sanitation laws that are specific to and relevant to our discussion this afternoon. All right. Okay, there is a written objective in your materials, but let me just allow me to restate and emphasize what I think is the objective of my discussion of these laws. No? The talk on environmental and sanitation laws is supposed to make you better understand and appreciate existing statutes and regulations and be able to relate this to what you have discussed earlier, to the existing practices and activities of stakeholders in the water sector. Whatever profession we are in and whatever advocacy we are pursuing, I think everybody is in agreement that we have a role to play, and we need to play a positive role, make a positive contribution to ensure the sustainability of a precious natural resource, which is water, and of course also to protect the environment. When we talk of water cycle, we also first take a look at the natural water cycle. And it involves, of course, as you learn in your science subjects, evaporation, condensation, precipitation, the natural cycle of water, the coming and going of rainwater and then evaporation and then coming back again to Mother Earth in the form of rain. There is no human intervention yet. And the cycle goes naturally, seamlessly, and without any it doesn't bog down, and it doesn't affect the quality of the water. The water is maintained. The quality of the water is preserved. But the world is not like that. There are humans inhabiting the planet. And therefore, in the course of our utilization, in the course of our use, and in the course of our disposal of water, we have the natural, all of these processes have the natural tendency to pollute. All right. Once we affect the natural cycle of water, there is a tendency to pollute. There is a tendency to break the cycle. And therefore, what do we do? Do we stop utilizing water? Do we stop using water? We cannot do so. We cannot do that. Therefore, it is important that in our utilization, disposition, treatment of water, we have to do it based on certain standards. It is important that we do it based on existing guidelines. All right. Even in our utilization of water for domestic use, even just for domestic use, there are standards to be met. There are guidelines to be followed on how we will be able to enjoy potable water and how we should be able to dispose water without contributing to the pollution around us. And when we talk of utilization of water, we naturally talk about infrastructure facilities, a network of facilities that constitute a system that address the needs of a growing population, the facilities that address the needs of the growing population. And these facilities should at the same time ensure the sustainability of water source, ensure the quality of our water source. Because we are growing, because our metropolis is the population in our urban areas, in our metropolis, is really growing by leaps and bounds. Hindi na po pwede yung ganitong source of water in our backyard. There is therefore a need to already come up, and we have been coming up, as you will see later on, with huge projects for distribution, treatment, and processing of wastewater, and treatment of water for domestic use. But in any undertaking or activity or any project, such as the putting up of water infrastructure facilities, the government or the state is duty bound to come in to protect and regulate, especially projects that would have environmental impact, especially projects that would affect the health of the general public. That's where the government must come in. And the legal framework and the legal basis for the government's involvement in all of these processes is found in our fundamental law, of course. Our Philippine Constitution provides, Article 2, Section 16, that the state shall provide and advance the right of the people to a balanced and healthful ecology in accord with the rhythm and harmony of nature. Very poetic pa ang pagkaka-format ng ating Constitution insofar as Section 16 is concerned. Balanced and healthful ecology in accord with the rhythm and harmony of nature. It's very pleasing to the ears, but we have just to use our eyes to see what's happening around us. Is there really, is the state winning the war against pollution? Then all of us obviously will have to pitch in and do our share to make sure that we have indeed a balanced and healthful ecology. Let us also take a look at Article 12, Section 2 of the Philippine Constitution. It provides that all lands of the public domain, all waters, minerals, coal, petroleum, and other mineral oils, etc., are owned by the state. Waters and the other items enumerated here are owned by the state, and it shall not be alienated. And therefore, the exploration, development, and utilization of natural resources, including water, shall be under the full control and supervision of the state. Take note of this fundamental basis, no? Legal basis. We're citing the Constitution itself, the fundamental law of the land. No? The duty of the state to maintain a healthy environment, the state's ownership of waters. And because water is owned by the state, it is the state which has the right to undertake water-related activities. But the Constitution also provides, Section 2, Article 12, that the state may enter into co-production, joint venture, or production sharing agreements with Filipino citizens, with corporations or associations, at least 60% of whose capital is owned by such citizens. What does it mean? It means that only Filipino citizens and Philippine corporations or corporations owned by Filipino citizens may undertake these activities, these water-related activities. Agreements may be for a period not exceeding 25 years, renewable for not more than 25 years. This is also reflected in relevant laws such as the Build, Operate, and Transfer Law, where when the government partners with a private entity, and when the private entity will undertake a public utility operation, it is required that the private partner is a Filipino citizen. And the basis again is Section 11 of Article 12, Philippine Constitution. No franchise, certificate, or any other form of authorization. Any other form of authorization could be a contract, could be a BOT contract. And no such contract, no such franchise, no such certificate for the operation of a public utility. Remember that the operation of a water distribution system, the operation of a septage facility, operation of a sewerage system that caters to the general public is a public utility. And franchises, certificates, and authorizations can be granted only to Filipino citizens or Philippine corporations. That's what this constitutional provision provides, speaks of. And because of this anchor, because of these constitutional provisions, Congress, for its part, passed laws in relation to environmental protection, in relation to utilization of natural resources. And relevant agencies have been tasked to regulate the activities of these private partners, to regulate and oversee the activities of these individuals and corporate entities, especially when they have environmental impact and when they have impact on the health and welfare of the general public. So whenever an activity or project is undertaken, and when that project poses a potential environmental risk or impact, an environmental compliance certificate is required. That is where regulation will now come in. that is where the state will now come in. That is where the government will now come in. Specifically, we're talking about the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, specifically the Environmental Management Bureau. All right. So the EMB of the DENR will have to say yes to a project. We'll have to evaluate whether the environmental risks involved are addressed. All right. Hence, any corporation, any private proponent seeking to undertake a project with environmental risks will have to secure the ECC. All right. The government, pursuant to its mandate to protect the environment, has made a list of projects which need an environmental clearance. Mining, of course, that's power plants, thermal power, all types of power plants actually, and other similar infrastructures. And when we talk of this list, we're talking about the EMB Memorandum Circular 5. The latest one was issued in July 2014. It's entitled Revised Guidelines for Coverage Screening and Standardized Requirements. Unfortunately, due to time constraints, I won't be able to delve into the specifics of these guidelines, but I want you to understand and appreciate a macro view of all these laws and how they interrelate and how they are implemented on the ground, all right? In relation to the water-related infrastructure projects, such as dams, dams, hydropower plants, irrigation systems, water supply projects and distribution system, sewage and septage facilities. All right, so these are all relevant infrastructure, water-related infrastructure projects that would require ECC, that would be examined by the EMB of the DENR, whether such facility is compliant with the standards set by law and by the regulatory body. All right. When we talk of sewer system, you will be amazed that sewer systems are can actually be humongous projects, huge projects. In Paris, for instance, the sewer system in Paris, France, is such huge that in Les Miserables, Jean Valjean said, Paris was another Paris under herself, a Paris of sewers, which has its streets, its crossings, its squares, its blind alleys, its arteries, its circulation, which is lime minus the human form. All right? So these types of projects require environmental clearance. You see how impactful these projects are. Even, in fact, bridges and other infrastructures require environmental clearance. Brooklyn Bridge, when it was built in 1883, also had to undergo a serious environmental evaluation. Its impact on the environment. It's now an iconic structure that connects New York to Brooklyn. Maraming nag-i-Instagram photo dyan. Maraming selfie dyan. Maraming nagwe-wedding photography dyan o prenuptial photography. But after the pandemic, if any one of you gets to visit New York, I am sorry to tell you that it's no longer there. Brooklyn Bridge has been permanently destroyed by a giant lizard. So it wasn't the environment that damaged the Brooklyn Bridge. It was something else. But kidding aside, environmental impact assessment is needed in all projects, needed in major infrastructure projects. EIA is a means of drawing together an assessment of the likely significant environmental effects arising from a proposed development in a systematic way. In a systematic way. EIA in the Philippines actually was conceived in 1977, proceeding from UN declarations. But eventually, in 1977, the country came up with Philippine Environmental Policy, Presidential Decree 1151. You will notice that sometimes I say Presidential Decree, sometimes I say Republic Act. Republic Act, as you know, are the laws passed by Congress. Presidential Decree, where we are referring to the decrees issued by former President Marcos. And during the martial law regime, a presidential decree is equivalent to a law passed by Congress. So PDs, or presidential decrees, actually have the force and effect of a law passed by Congress. So magkapareho po ang kanilang effect. So PD 1151, issued in 1977, sets forth the Philippine Environmental Policy. It mandates all national agencies, government-owned and controlled corporations, and even private corporations to prepare an environmental impact statement. That's why it's very important if you are later on called on to be a consultant of or assist in the preparation of a project proposal. The first thing, of course, that you need to, well, there's always the legal component, the financial component, and the technical component of any project proposal. And when we talk of technical component, that's where we talk of the engineering and environmental issues. So the first thing that you need to determine is whether this project would require, in 99%, it would require the submission of an environmental impact statement. All right. The environmental impact assessment system in the Philippines is officially referred to as the Philippine Environmental Impact Statement System. The following year, PD 1586 was passed, and the requirement for an ECC was institutionalized, institutionalized, and it's now the Environmental Management Bureau of the DNR, which issues the ECC. The Philippine Environmental Impact Statement System, therefore, established through 1586, PD 1586, is a mechanism to maintain and attain an orderly balance between socioeconomic growth and environmental protection. We cannot stop developers from developing condominium projects. We cannot put a halt to the setting up of more septage treatment facilities, bulk water treatment plants, distribution network. But there has to be a balance. The government has to strike a balance between these development projects and environmental protection. This is where a strong regulation will come in, as in any activity that would involve the private sector. The government, it behooves the government to put up a regulatory mechanism that is effective to attain and maintain such orderly balance. So we're focused, we have thus far focused on the environmental impact of projects. But take note that there is also a health issue there, especially when we talk of food and beverage, and when we talk of drinking water, for instance. Hence, the Code on Sanitation of the Philippines is material because it looks at water as a health issue as well. The Sanitation Code, or the Code on Sanitation of the Philippines, PD 856, specifically empowers the Department of Health. It is the Department of Health that is empowered to undertake the promotion and preservation of the health of the people. So these are the preamble. To extend maximum health benefits or services to the people in the rural areas. And maximum health. Of course, upgrading the quality of health services. In other words, to always ensure that our population is enjoying better health services. Compared to other countries, of course, we concede that the Philippines is very much lagging in terms of health services and health benefits. But we have laws that, such as 856, that specifically mandates the Department of Health to upgrade the quality of health services to the people, and also to assist local health agencies in developing health programs. No? Take note, class, it's not in the prepared slides, but take note that with the passage of the local government code, local government units are now have attained some degree of autonomy insofar as providing services to their respective territorial boundaries, to their respective constituents. And local health officials are also there to give the service, to undertake all of these programs. But the Department of Health is still very much mandated to assist these local health officials. The health secretary specifically is empowered to promulgate rules and regulations and standards for the proper implementation and enforcement of the provisions of the code. And one important output of the Department of Health, of the Secretary of Health, is the National Drinking Water Standards. It is the Department of Health which determines whether the water that comes through the pipes and into our homes, respective homes, meet the water standards provided. In a series of administrative orders, the latest in 2017, the Department of Health has been accrediting private testing laboratories to evaluate the quality of water. All right, but the sanitation code, as I mentioned earlier, also refers to food and beverages and other public facilities like markets, hotels, ports, food establishments. It's the Department of Health which is duty bound to regulate and maintain and ensure that all business entities have the required sanitary permit. So it's the local health officer which will make sure that, especially this time of the pandemic, that all of these establishments that are catering to the needs of their clients, the general public, are sanitary with the issuance of the needed and appropriate permit. All right. let's go to the water code of the Philippines. Water code also now refers to the utilization of water. And what are the underlying principles insofar as the water code is concerned? First, all waters belong to the state. Remember, constitutional provision that I read to you earlier, Section 2, Article 11 of the, Article 12 rather, of the Constitution. All waters belong to the state, and even waters found in private land belong to the state. All waters, number 2, all waters that belong to the state cannot be subject to acquisitive prescription. It cannot be alienated. The Constitution provides for that. It cannot be subject to acquisitive prescription. So kahit dekada merong underground river traversing a private property, it's not yours. No? It is state-owned. And the state, because of its exclusive ownership, may allow the use or development of waters by administrative concession. There are private entities which are now, which have now been granted the authority, the concession to develop and distribute water. And the water code, in fact, enumerates the waters that belong to the state, rivers and their natural beds, continuous or intermittent waters of springs and brooks, natural lakes and lagoons, natural lakes and lagoons. Of course, if you have a big backyard and you get a contractor to get to build for you a man-made lagoon, that's yours. It's yours. D, all other categories of surface waters, such as water flowing over lands. Water from rainfall. Water from agricultural runoff, seepage and drainage. These are all owned by the state. Atmospheric water, subterranean or groundwaters. I mentioned earlier about river traversing, underground river traversing your property. Seawater. All of these are owned by the state. But citizens, specifically Filipino citizens and juridical persons, are or may be allowed to exploit and develop water resources. Okay? All that is needed is for this proponent to apply for or to secure a water permit. Okay, when we talk of utilization, the law also provides for certain guidelines. So Article 31 specifically provides the preference in the development of water resources shall consider security of the state and multiple use. Multiple use, we can refer to dams, for instance. A dam would have multiple use. One dam could be the water for one dam could be used for irrigation, could be used for this domestic utilization. It could be used for hydropower plants to generate power. And the utilization of subterranean or groundwater shall be coordinated with the utilization also of surface waters, so that there will be a balance and there is no utilization that is superior to the other. All right. And when we talk of utilization and exploitation and even development and protection of water resources, we have the National Water Resources Board. The NWRB used to be under the Department of Public Works and Highways. It used to be seen as an infra-regulatory body, but it's more than that. We know that. That's why, thankfully, it's been placed under the office of the president for a more macro regulation of the water, of our water resource, utilization and exploitation of our water resource. It is the NWRB which issues the provisional authority for anyone who would want to exploit and utilize water in a specific locality. Normally, a provisional authority is valid for 6 months. But because of the pandemic, all PAs issued are now automatically extended, the validity of which are now automatically extended to December 31, 2021. Of course, when we talk of wastewater, when we talk of treatment of wastewater, remember the cycle that I was telling you about? Utilization, sourcing, utilization, or use, and then disposal of wastewater. All of this, the entire process is regulated. And when we talk of wastewater treatment, another law passed in 2004 will kick in, Philippine Clean Water Act. It's the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, which is principally duty-bound to implement the law. And in 2005, DENR issued an administrative order to streamline the processes for the prevention, control, and abatement of water pollution. Remember, when we utilize water, we are actually dependent on the water out there, and we cannot allow that the water out there, the groundwater, surface water, the quality of which will be steadily deteriorate because of our poor wastewater disposal. Hence, DENR's action pursuant to its mandate under the Philippine Clean Water Act of 2004. The DENR is also tasked to formulate an integrated water quality management framework, water quality goals and targets, period of compliance, water pollution control strategies and techniques. So the DENR is the one tasked by the law to include all of this in a framework so that there is an integrated approach to combat water pollution, all right? So we talk about water quality management system, water quality management area, and insofar as identifying the water quality management areas, it is the DENR and the National Water Resources Board which have been mandated to jointly identify, all right? What areas could still be exploited? What areas are already fully exploited? In fact, we handle clients who are into bulk water service provision. And we have to contend, our clients will have to contend with determining which specific area they could still tap or get water for their bulk water supply. And they have to contend with the National Water Resources Board. They have to contend with the guidelines and regulations in securing a water permit. The Clean Water Act provides for the creation of a governing board, and it is the DENR representative who acts as the chair. And there are also representatives from local government officials, the mayors, the governments, the local government units themselves, no? And even the national government, non-government organizations are also part of the governing board. All right. May I request everyone to please mute your camera? I mean, you mute your microphone. Sorry. All right. The governing board's functions are as follows. No? The board rather is expected to regularly publish water quality status. It is important for stakeholders to know the water quality status in a given locality. The board is also tasked to formulate strategies to effectively implement the law, to effectively implement the legal objective, the law's objective rather, the Republic Act's objective of abating and controlling and addressing water pollution. All right, and of course, monitoring and review functions are also. Note, however, that there is a 1966 law creating the Laguna Lake Development Authority. I remember Young telling you all earlier that there are at least 30 government offices implementing various water regulations, various water related laws. And sometimes, and oftentimes rather, there is an or overlapping functions or duties. Well, I don't want to comment about the LLDA, but for purposes of this afternoon's discussion, the LLDA is there, and it is automatically the areas around Laguna Lake has been identified as one quality management area. And it is the LLDA, not the NL, not the other offices, not the other offices or agencies of the government, but specifically LLDA, which has been mandated to set and manage the area. However, it is now the standards and wastewater charge system of the Clean Water Act that will apply or that will govern. Okay. Again, going back to Young's statement earlier, ang dami-daming ahensya, ang dami-daming ahensya sa ngayon ng pamahalaan ang nangangasiwa ng ating tubig, ng water sector. No? That's actually true. But let me now give you a rundown of all of these relevant government offices and agencies. It's not enough that you know and you get a survey of the laws that relates to water, but I thought it would be better. It would be also good for you to know what are these agencies and what are their respective roles. First, let's start with the Office of the President. Office of the President. I've already told you that the NWRB is under the Office of the President. It is chaired by the DNR Secretary. It's still an environmental issue. It is still governed by environment policies by the government. Hence, NWRB, although there is an executive director, although it operates as an autonomous office, it is, however, chaired by the DNR Secretary. Then there is also another office under the Office of the President, the National Irrigation Administration, tasked to develop and manage irrigation systems. It was only in 2014 when it was placed under the Office of the President. It used to be under the the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. So under the Office of the President, we already have two, the NWRB and the National Irrigation Administration. Now we have the national government agencies. We have the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. We have under it, the Environment Management Bureau. I already touched on this earlier. It is the Bureau which is tasked to evaluate environment impact statements and applications for environment compliance certificates. ECCs emanate from the EMB. The DNR and EMB is also tasked, are also tasked to implement the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act of 2000, Republic Act 9003. EMB is the lead agency for that. And then we have the Department of Public Works and Highways. Under the Department of Public Works and Highways, we have MWSS, the Metropolitan Water Works and Sewerage System. Dati NAWASA, but now it's MWSS. The whole of NCR, Bulacan, and Rizal, and some parts of Cavite. MWSS is tasked to ensure an uninterrupted and adequate supply and distribution of potable water for domestic and other purposes at just and equitable rates. All right. The proper operation and maintenance of sewerage systems is also part of its mandate. Okay, water distribution and operation and maintenance of sewerage systems. In 1997, Congress passed the Water Crisis Act. 95, 96, 97, the water service in Metro Manila was at its worst. We already have a fully deteriorated, depreciated distribution line. Hence, the government thought it wise to allow the private sector to operate the system. Hence, the transfer of financial burden to the private sector was one of the objectives set by the Water Crisis Act, increase in operational efficiency, the improvement of the services and the standards, and minimize the tariff impact. Well, whether the tariff was actually minimized or reduced or not, but to be sure, the services the water service in the covered areas have considerably improved. Right? Then we have the Department of Health. Okay, we have the Department of Health to also ensure the sanitary standards, the drinking water standards. We talked about the sanitation or the Code of Sanitation of the Philippines, 856. And pursuant to that, the Department of Health issued Administrative Order 10, 2017-10, the Philippine National Standards for Drinking Water of 2017. Then, of course, we have the Department of Science and Technology, tasked to conduct research and development programs together with the DNR. Then we still have the Department of Transportation. The Philippine Coast Guard is under it, and it is responsible for preventing ocean dumping of water pollutants. So we also have, aside from the MWSS, we have the Local Water Utilities Administration. If you recall, MWSS was specific to NCR, Bulacan, and Rizal, and certain parts of Cavite. But what about the other areas around the country? It's under LUA. And Presidential Decree 198, the Provincial Water Utilities Act of 1973, also created water districts. I mean, authorized the creation of water districts across the country. So LUA, it is a GICP. There are several variants of government corporations. There is a government owned and controlled. There is a government corporate entity. But LUA specifically is a GICP, government instrumentality with corporate powers. It has a specialized lending function mandated by law to promote and oversee the development of water supply systems in the provinces, in the cities, in the municipalities, outside of Metro Manila, outside the coverage of MWSS, all right? So we have several hundreds of local water districts, and many of them already signed up with private partners to be able to improve its services to its respective covered area. A water district is a local corporate entity. It's supposed to operate in the same way MWSS is operating in Metro Manila. It operates and it maintains the water supply system. It is also tasked to take care of the septage and sewerage system in the locality where it operates. Okay, we have seen that these relevant laws are there to protect the environment, to ensure that water utilization and distribution and wastewater disposal are done properly. And we have seen that the implementation of these relevant environment and sanitation laws involves various government offices and agencies. But hopefully, with or without the passage of a law that would create the Department of Water, which is actually long overdue already, all of these government offices are supposed to implement these laws for the following purposes: monitor water quality to ensure availability of potable and safe drinking water for the population. Second, to mandate all LGUs to implement effective wastewater treatment. Also, there are already, LGUs are already entering into partnerships with private entities to be able to do this. Also, to ensure a rational allocation of water. All right. How many million liters a day should be allotted to produce power? How many MLDs are supposed to be allotted for irrigation? During rainy season, should the MLD for irrigation be converted to or diverted to or utilized instead for water or power production? How many MLD should be devoted to for drinking water purposes? Also, these various government offices implementing the relevant environment and sanitation laws should ensure that the utilization and treatment of water will not be hazardous to the environment. All right, so I think that's the time I have. I hope you learned a thing or two about the relevant laws that operates and affects the water utilization and disposition. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Attorney Raoul, for giving us a very quick but quite a comprehensive survey of the various environment and sanitation laws that we have, as well as the various concerned offices, departments in the bureaucracy, and also beyond. So while you were speaking, we have been receiving a couple, quite a few questions, and I would love to share them with you right now. One of the questions is from an engineering student from Mapua. Her question goes, do you think it's about time to renew or amend some of the laws on sanitation as they may be outdated with the rise of new technologies and pressing environmental issues that we have today?
Yes, it will be helpful, but not indispensable. Why? Because the general principles for the implementation and to ensure the proper drinking water standards, for instance, is there. We do not actually need a new law, considering that the Department of Health has already been specifically mandated to come up with drinking standards, no? Drinking water standards. But yes, it would be helpful to update our laws to keep up with the times. You spoke of new technology. Even in the advent of or with the coming up of new technologies, even old laws, even the the BOT already encourages the introduction of new technology in various infrastructure projects. There is actually, what I'm saying is that there's actually a law already that encourages the use of new technology for various infrastructure projects.
Thank you, Attorney. If Janina, if you're happy with the answer, feel free to type in the chat box. If you have follow-up questions, feel free to send them again. For our second
able to
question,
address your question, Janina.
feel free to unmute, Janina, if you're able to. While waiting for Janina, the second question goes, what do you think are the aspects that the youth should consider in understanding the legal aspects, as well as the various positive and negative implications of infrastructure development? So the person who actually asked prefaced the question by sharing about the Kaliwa Dam case that received massive response, not only from environmental advocates, but from the people in general. So I think that he is asking about your thoughts around aspects of the youth that they should consider in terms of infrastructure development. Yeah.
All right. For our youth sector, it is imperative that we appreciate the need to utilize some resources now, but at the same time to ensure the sustainability of our use of our limited resource. Sustainability, therefore, is key. It's always a tricky business. It's always tricky to arrive at a balance, to come up with a balance of how we will be able to utilize water for our growing needs today, while at the same time ensuring that we don't permanently damage or irreversibly damage the environment. Because even if we succeed in utilizing our resources for today's use, if there is nothing more that can be used for future generations, kayo yun, then it's useless. No? Then it is useless. Therefore, we have to be vigilant, we have to be aware, and we have to do our share in making our own critique, our own evaluation, whether an ongoing project is indeed balanced in the sense that it will serve current needs, but at the same time preserve the needs of the future generation.
Thank you, Attorney. I think to close the program, may we ask for your parting words to our young audience? I think majority of the participants this afternoon are young people, but we also have people from the academy and also young water professionals.
Firstly, I would like to commend you for spending your Saturday on a very meaningful activity, on a very meaningful program. Water matters. Environment matters. Sustainability is key. These are the things that you have to always remember. Water matters. Bakit nagkukulang pa tayo ng drinking water? We are living in a tropical country, madalas pang umulan. But remember, water treatment and distribution is an altogether different map. Then we have the role that we have to play in wastewater treatment. Tell our LGUs, tell our local government officials, where is our operational septage treatment service? Where is our operational sewerage system? Where is it? I don't want to cite the city, but there is a city which has a sewerage system that was still built by the Japanese, improving on what the Americans built. In other words, they're only servicing 40% of what is needed. So we cannot, we don't have the luxury of time to still delay this. Local government units must act now. There is a deadline under the law for them to come up and put up the sewer, the septage facilities, and sabihin natin, Mayor, your time is almost up. If you cannot put up the facility, then it's time for you to go. We have to demand accountability from our leaders, from our government officials. Why? Because water matters, environment matters, sustainability is key. On that note, I would like to thank you all again for your active participation in this activity, very meaningful activity today.
With that, thank you so much to Attorney Raoul. Can we have heart reacts or thumbs up button to show our appreciation to our awesome, amazing speaker this afternoon? Thank you once again, Attorney. And yeah, I think the main gist of the talk is not really to talk about the different laws. More than anything, I think it's really the idea of making sure that we're holding power to account, that we're checking our laws and making sure that the people in government, that the people in the different sectors are following the laws as well. So I think, yeah, that's the main gist that I'm able to get. So once again, salamat po, Attorney Raoul. Pleasure to hear from your wonderful session. To the participants, salamat, Attorney.
Thank you.
Can we take a photo before you leave?
I always forget.
That's okay. Josh, can you please take a picture? Everyone, thank you. Awesome. Thank you so much.
All
Sir,
right.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'll
Bye-bye.
hand it back to John, everyone, to close up the session, which includes post-survey as well as some competitions which our participants are eligible to enter.
Thank you. So as mentioned, we've come to the end of the program, but we'd like to thank the participants for joining day one. We weren't able to mention your schools, but I can see some of the schools in your Zoom name, so I'd love to mention some of them. Hopefully I don't miss anyone. We have the University of Science and Technology of Southern Philippines, Western Mindanao State University, Central Luzon State U. We have the Philippine Society of Sanitary Engineers of Mapua University. And if I'm not mistaken, PSC is Palawan State University. So if I'm not able to mention your school, feel free to chat in the chat box. And also for some housekeeping, we're quite late, mga ilang minutes lang, yay. So it's an achievement already. But if you can answer the survey, please, so we know your feedback on the speakers, on the sessions that we have had this afternoon. And yeah, just we want to hear from you on where we can improve, and if you get, if you are able to learn something from the speakers. So you may scan this QR code, or you may use the link. If Josh can put up the link in the chat box, that would be great. So remember that the survey will be the basis for the certificate as well. So for day one certificate. Next slide, please. We would also like to invite you to join a couple of competitions. So we have an article competition as well as a photography competition, which are, I think these are both July 24. So you have a couple of weeks to work on them. We will send the details together with the certificate. So when you send the feedback form, we'll send you the certificate and also send you the details for these two competitions. We hope that you can spread the word about it to your students, to your classmates, and to anyone in your social network. And of course, we'd like to invite you to day two, get keen guys, for day two of our STEM Future Leaders program. So we will have a new batch of speakers who will speak about personal effectiveness and decision making. We will talk about water supply management, and we will have a more deep dive discussion on sanitation and hygiene. So we hope you can take part in those in day two of our program. And please don't forget to like our Facebook page. Just search Macy Consultants. You can also visit our website so you can check what we're actually doing in the advocacy, both in Australia and the Philippines. We have an ongoing program, for example, in Cebu. And if it's something that resonates with you and you want to bring it wherever you are, feel free to send us an email or connect with us on our socials. And finally, um, don't forget our hashtag for the program. We'd love to read and see your posts, your photos, your reflections from today. And without further ado, this has been Macy Consultants. And have a great rest of the weekend, everyone. Maraming salamat po sa pag-attend and pag-participate today. Do you have a closing, may closing
Yes.
music?
I don't have that. Maybe you can play something. But thank you, John, for moderating an amazing first pilot program. So again, everyone, show your reacts to John. He's been an amazing moderator to make this session possible with our speakers and our sponsors. So reacts, thanks, and yeah, excited to see everyone in day two. More details will be on our Facebook page as well as the competition. But as John mentioned, we'll be sharing this as well to your emails into the course. Now have a safe and lovely weekend.
Central Luzon State U, I wasn't able to mention. Thank you for joining.
Totoo, maybe.